Hello, BookTube. I have what I feel certain is just the first of today's mail hauls for you. I feel certain in my bones that there's more coming. But it could be that what I'm feeling is this little achy, painy thing in my fingers, especially in these first long joints, when moisture is coming. It could be that it's not my book spidey sense at all. It rained a little uh, just before dawn today. I was reading. I was reading on my iPad all night long, and the rain just before dawn carried over through the dawn moment. And Semi woke up the little bean who absolutely hates the rain. She hates even its philosophical existence as a category. So it wakes her out of a sound sleep. That's how much she hates it, just so she can wake up and hate it. And then it stopped. And it's been a kind of a washy but beautiful day since, but I'm pretty sure that a heavier band of rain is coming tonight, and that might explain why my hands feel like you've been working them over with a ball peen hammer. I don't know. Is this what's going to be true for me from now on? At 28 years old with washboard abs and bee sting lips and A-frame shoulders? Doesn't seem fair, now does it? But if it's not oncoming rain that I'm feeling, then it might be that there's more mail coming. But in the meantime, we have one package, and it's an Amazon package. So one of you may have misbehaved. And we also have periodicals. And the first periodical, you're gonna look at it and say, well, what are you getting this for? You've already walked us through the New York Review of Books, the so-called art issue. It's true. This is not for me. This is for a woman who lives up the hill and around the corner a bit. And the reason I know where she lives is because my mailman routinely delivers her TLS and her New York Review of Books to me. Sometimes he'll wrap up two copies of the exact same issue. I don't know what he's thinking. Even if he's not reading the labels, who would order two different subscriptions of the same thing? I guess he must just assume that there could only possibly be one such bookish egghead on his route, so he just delivers them all here. I haven't managed to catch him in the act to get him to stop doing it. Fortunately, this is within walking distance, so the Bean and I will just incorporate this into our walk. We do it all the time. To make sure this woman gets her TLS and her New York Review of Books. So we'll just incorporate that into the afternoon walk and hand deliver it to her doorstep. I wish, of course, that we could meet her just one time. If she subscribes to the TLS and the New York Review of Books, I know I already like her, but I think she would find it quite hilarious that her mail is being delivered by a little schnauzer. But one way or another, that was one periodical. Another one, of course, was the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, which I once upon a time used to routinely tell you was the greatest small town, low circulation print newspaper anywhere in the country. Only I still love it. Of course, I have a huge history with the Gazette. It's an absolute incredible thing to me. Even now, after all these years, it's an incredible thing to me that I am their book reviewer. When I went so many decades being a loyal reader. But I don't know that I can say that quite so cavalierly anymore, since I am now the book section editor of a small print newspaper, not on the Vineyard, but in northern Georgia. The state that gave the country Marjorie Taylor Greene. but also John Ossoff. But the Vineyard Gazette has the nature columns in the back that everybody reads, and then great photography. There's a famous landmark, famous statue in the Vineyard. You look at the high definition granularity of that photo. Just incredible. It's a fantastic local newspaper. I am almost positive that I am not in this issue. I actually have a bit of a backlog for reviews to my editor, and that's not good. That should never happen. No, I'm not in this one. It's not good. I should never let a backlog happen with any editor. Some editors get around it by simply giving me deadlines. Which is so counterintuitive for the 21st century, where you'd like to think that if you give somebody a hard deadline, they'll sue you and win. But I am a creature of the old school when it comes to these kinds of things. And if you say, hey, I just sent you a book, I'm dying to know what you think of it, and I write back and say, a couple of days later, I got the book, I'll dive into it, and they say, my editor says, oh, that's great, that's fantastic, let me know what you think. then you're never going to hear from me again. You are going to hear from me again. But it's not the same thing as if you say, hey, I just sent you a book, deadline's the 10th. If you tell me that, then you'll get your copy on the 10th, and it will be clean as a whistle, and it will stand up at attention. But it's weird. I've noticed it in myself, and I don't seem to be able to get around it. Book section editors that say, well, hey, it's great. Whenever you get around to it, I will never get around to it. It's this weird thing. You would think that it wouldn't matter since I love what I do. But that's the reason why I now have a backlog. There are two parts to that reason. One is that I have not been given a hard and fast deadline, although my editor did come closer to that in our last email exchange, so I'm going to just take it that way. But in addition to that, the first of the books in the lineup, the first of the books in the list of ones that I'm backed up on, is blah. It's not bad, and it's not really good. And for me, I am perfectly okay if a book is bad. Then I can go to town on it and have a great deal of fun. And I'm, of course, overjoyed if a book is really good, because then I can go to town on it and praise it from the rooftops. But when it's just blah, when it just shows up for the doctor's appointment, and it's got its paperwork ready, and you check all the boxes and you send it out, and an hour later you don't remember that it was ever there, that's not so good. Especially since that has always struck me as not really cricket to say about a book. That even if it's true, with books like that, and let's face it, that's 90% of all books. With books like that, those are the ones that strike me as being the type that you should, as the saying goes, pass over in silence. Because they're just out there. If somebody's drifted towards it, they'll drift towards it. But it's always seemed to me to be a little bit mean to an author to write a review warning readers that their book is just competent, unless it's being extolled by every other critical voice as something that is brilliant. In which case, if it's just competent, then I will feel a missionary zeal to get out there and say, this is just competent. This is not brilliant. Do not reorganize your life around cleaning your room. Don't do it. Don't reorganize your entire life and epistemology around this average book. But I'll have to come up with a way to do it, because the Vineyard Gazette doesn't bash books. And that's okay. That is purely a book section editor's decision. And as I said to you years and years ago when I was giving you tips about book reviewing, one of those tips was don't argue with your editor. Under any circumstances whatsoever, your editor knows what he wants in his section. Now, you might think it's wrong, short-sighted, whatever, but it's not your show. It's your editor's show. So, if you know that a book section that you want to place a review with, or maybe many reviews with, if you know already from reading them that they don't ever tear apart books, and you send them a hatchet job anyway, then what you're asking is, okay, I know your practice going back from before I was born, but I want you to change it for me. And that's a very zillennial 21st century thing to ask. It'd be great if we all got out of the habit of asking things like that. So I just need to get around it. That's all. I just need to get around it. I just need to... There are going to be plenty of people that the one book in question that I'm talking about, the sort of logjam, there are going to be plenty of people who will read this and like it. And I know that. So what I have to do is just write a review for them. And that's all right. I can do that. But the last thing we got is the greatest literary journal in the world. I'm disheartened to say, but I must be honest, that is not Big Canoe News in Northern Georgia. That is the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement. As you can see from the cover, this is the showcase piece here is by Patricia Williams, and it re-examines Gone with the Wind. Gone But Not Forgotten is the title here. Patricia Williams on the malign racial legacy of a literary classic. And you on BookTube all knew this was coming, right? It's long overdue. It's been happening. It's actually been coming for a long time. That the 21st century censors that I excoriate on this channel all the time, who like to cancel authors, like to cancel books, like to cancel whole literary careers, and force you. Because it's pure terrorism. It's pure fascism. They want to force you to signal your agreement. And you've known for a long time, especially those of you who love this book. I know so many readers who deplore its racism and deplore both the active racism and the racism that Margaret Mitchell wasn't even aware of that you can see clear as a bell now when you read it in the 21st century. I know plenty of you readers who recognize those things about this book and love it anyway. Love it with a passion that is hardly exceeded by any other love for any other book. I have never felt that way about Gone with the Wind. I've read it a few times and like it, but it's never done that to me in a way that it has done to so many readers over the decades who I have loved to talk to, respected their opinions. So I always say there's no right and wrong way to do this. There are wrong ways to estimate the objective worth of a book. I've never known a fan of Gone with the Wind to do that. Never. They know perfectly well its shortcomings. In fact, they tend to know the shortcomings better than the critics of the book do. They just love it anyway. For what I'd be the first to admit is an incredible narrative rhapsody. It just sweeps you off your feet as a reader. But you knew that the censors were coming for it, right? You know that you will live to see a day when the publisher of Gone with the Wind in America, which makes a boatload off it every year, will simply stop publishing it. And they'll do it not out of any voluntary choice of their own, but because 12 psychos on Twitter tell them, if you don't stop, we will drag you through the mud. We will organize a hate campaign that not only calls you a bigoted publisher, but that as a matter of course, just on a Monday morning without even thinking about it, doxes every single one of your employees. And by doxing, I mean release to the public on social media your medical forms, your social security number, your latest known verified address, verified by a terrorist who goes to your door to see if you're there. All that sort of stuff is just routine for the allegedly woke censorship mob. The allegedly barbaric alt-right crowd would never do anything like that. The tiny slivers of that crowd that do stuff like that are hated and called out and excoriated first by other members of the alt-right, not on the other side of the spectrum. I know this from personal experience. The one side of the spectrum, if you disagree with them or do something they don't think you should, is much less agreeable to deal with than the other side. I thought that this piece was pretty good, but a little too diffuse. Patricia Williams works in everything but the kitchen sink, everything but the racist kitchen sink in here, when the piece would have been much stronger, I think, if it had just dealt with Gone with the Wind. I've read pieces like that, and I find it fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I think if we take a step back, none of you are really, zealots either way, alt-right or SJW, and I appreciate that enormously. It is such a relief that we can actually talk about these things without immediately rushing to social media to cancel each other. Instead, we rush to the comments to make fun of each other, but we don't rush to social media to cancel each other. But I have read some of those articles that say, not using this horrible word problematic in the scornful censorship schoolmarm way, be better, best practices. Not that way, but that some things are problems, and we should talk about them. Gone with the Wind is a perfect example of that in the bookish world. Perfect example of that. It has awakened so many people to a love of reading, and yet it is a deeply flawed book. Not just on the levels that I pay attention to, the technical execution, but also a large part of the racism that it conveys, consciously or unconsciously, on the part of its author. I think it's fascinating to talk about. I don't think that if a book has millions of people who are loving it and who routinely buy new copies because they've worn their old copies out, the publisher should probably just keep reprinting that until it doesn't make the money anymore. But one way or another, I think we're only at the beginning of this kind of censorship in America, not just for an obvious target like Gone with the Wind, but for a whole bunch of other things, just a whole bunch of other things. We are right on the edge. That we saw it. We're seeing it still with Amanda Gorman's collection of poetry. We're right on the edge of translators, for instance, having to submit not quality work, not their work history, but their genetic makeup to a publisher in order to get a deal, or not have a deal canceled. Never mind whether or not I've done any good work. We need your genetic profile. We need you to do a swab of the inside of your cheek. That's what we need to know about you. We don't need to know about your talent. And that's going to progress. If it isn't stopped, if people in authority don't simply say, shut up and get away from me, And also, don't expect to ever get a deal with this publishing house or any of its subsidiaries for the rest of your living days. For this one tweet, I am screenshotting it. I am printing that screenshot. I am tacking it on a bulletin board in the office. Don't expect to ever work here again. You race-baiting huckster. If people in authority don't start doing that, then the days of any kind of translation are numbered, of any kind of work that's canonical or that's any older than 15 years. And also, you know, these best practices, these schoolmarm type hand-wringing things about how, you know, we want to be really careful about cultural appropriation. We want to be really careful about hiring sensitivity readers. That is not the end of the discussion. That is so clearly just the beginning of the discussion. That will end with, you are not allowed to write outside of your own genetic and cultural experience. You're not allowed to do that. Anyway, Gone with the Wind. The reason for that long digression is because Gone with the Wind is the canary in the coal mine for that, as far as I'm concerned. But this issue had a lot of other interesting stuff in it, not just the Steve diatribe. Nothing interesting in the letters page, unfortunately, because that's usually a lot of fun. But there was a 3-part roundup of books about books, one of which, The Gifts of Reading, edited by Jenny Orchard, sounds really interesting. I don't have it myself. It comes out from Wiedenfield and Nicholson, so it might not have an American publisher. I haven't checked, but it sounded interesting. All books on books and reading always interest me. But there are other things here too. Yes, okay. Talk about something that doesn't have an American publisher and might never, but that Steve wants very badly. The publisher here is Carcanet, and this is the collected poems of Anthony Burgess. Me wanty. I have a couple of volumes that might do, but it sounds like this volume at 500 pages is the one I want, and it'll probably never get published in America. I'll probably have to go to Book Outlet or whatever to see a book depository, see if maybe there's a copy there. But there are other things I wanted to yell at you about. Aren't these videos fun? There are a couple of other things that struck me. Oh, yes. Let's see here. Rachel Bowley. I don't know her at all. She does a review of that Thorstein Veblen biography that I talked about, another review of it. And I have a copy up on the shelf and find it. I have found myself thinking about that book. I really enjoyed it. And a few of you wags said that maybe the reason that Veblen is the one economist that I can stand to read is because he spent time in Iowa and very much loved it. I know I have walked over every inch of the ground that he's walked over in Iowa. I've been to the place where he stayed many, many times, the town where he stayed many, many times. I would say it's beautiful, but that's redundant. All of Iowa is beautiful. But it's not the only reason, any more than that's the only reason I loved Dvorak. I found the book amazing, especially in recasting Veblen as a human being. And what was her name again? Rachel Bowlby also notices that as an element in the book, but takes it to task a little. Mentions that that there's a blind spot connected with there, that we don't learn as much as we should learn about Veblen's married life, about his in-laws. And I hadn't realized that until I read this review. So out it will come, folded it will be, and into that book it will go. There's also a little review of under history and literature. It's just a novel cycle. It's not anything archaeological. The review is by Catherine Aschenberg, and it's by Giorgio Bassani's The Novel of Ferrara, that W. Norton came out with in America in a gigantic volume. It included not only in the Gardens of the Viscontinis, but also all the other books in that sequence that are far less well known to an English language audience. They included it all in one book, and I rejoiced in the appearance of that book, and I touted it to my fellow reviewers endlessly, saying, look, I know it's 800 pages long, I know it's not anything you're familiar with, but you really ought to give it a try. You really ought to let your readers know about it, even though it's 800 pages. I've never led you astray before now, and I'm not now. And it gets a loving review in the TLS, and I couldn't help but notice that the UK edition is much nicer than the US edition. So now I'm wondering if that UK edition might exist in a trade paperback that I could just get. Yeah, okay. The review says it's an $800-page paperback from Norton in the UK, and it looks like that. So now I want that. So I will I guess I will go to Book Depository and see if maybe there's a bunch of stuff that I can get. I haven't ordered from Book Depository in quite some time. Then a reviewer named Catriona Kelly reviews the Volga, which is a book that I read and reviewed and then repatriated to a grateful Russophile. But probably the most interesting thing in this issue was at the end, the NB column at the end, which announces with a joyous headline that UK bookstores are now open again. And that was interesting to read that. But we get all the way to the end. Apparently, MC is the new writer of this column, and apparently they were a little bit irritated by some listicles going around trying to describe what the best novels of the 21st century are. The three greatest novels of the 21st century to date are All for Nothing by Walter Kompowski, The Lesser Bohemians by Amor McBride, and The Line of Beauty by Alan Hollinghurst. Thus much we learnt from a well-placed literary critic. The parlor game of critical trinities continues, however, since a rival authority on the subject writes to agree about The Lesser Bohemians, while adding Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellman and Dodge Rose by Jack Cox. The last of these novels is new to us. It calls to mind Henry Green in its skewed use of colloquial speech, Joyce in its love of inventories, and William Gaddis in its virtuoso lampooning of law, high finance, and national myth, according to the publisher. Couldn't do a better job of warning me away from it if you tried. Likewise, unfamiliar is the last of the critical trinity offered by Emma Knightley, who says that the trinity is Baudolino by Umberto Eco, The Last Days of New Paris by China Mieville, and Rites of Ecstasy by Helene Laval. And this, of course, got me thinking, what would such a list be? What would my list be? The 21st century is 20 years old now. That's young in terms of the century, but that's not newborn anymore. And it made me wonder, would The Lesser Bohemians be on there? It would certainly be a strong contender, as would Duck's Newburyport and The Line of Beauty. So it made me start to think, I wonder what the rest of you think. Are you informally keeping lists of great 21st century novels in your head? I wonder, there's a handful of us in this little corner of BookTube who read lots of new releases. And by new releases, I mean something in the last 20 years. I wonder if the BookTube channels there, if we could maybe start a round-robin discussion. Round-robin discussions wouldn't hurt you, right? That wouldn't, my BO wouldn't be a problem there, I assume. But I wonder what we would say. What would those channels say? Would there be any agreement? Would a lot of people say Duck's Newburyport? Would a lot of them say The Lesser Bohemians? Would Alan Hollinghurst be on the list? Pretty fascinating. But those were the periodicals, and then we have the book, the one Amazon package. I don't think I've ordered anything from Amazon. So one of you may have misbehaved and sent me something. So let's see what we have here. Oh my! Oh! Does this have a note in it? No. Oh, I saw this. I actually saw this in a list online, and I thought maybe I would ask the publisher for it. But then I thought, are you going to write about it? No, probably not. So, it'd be just greedy to do. But one of you must remember that I love this author. This is Arcade Publishing. It did a beautiful reprint of Frank McLean's biography of Napoleon, which has come up on this channel a couple of times, not only because he's one of my favorite biographers, but also because people have wanted to know what my favorite one-volume biography of Napoleon Bonaparte is, and it's this one. And I saw that this publisher was coming out with a really pretty paperback, a new reprint, and I just sort of let it go, but one of you did not. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, well, this is well made, so fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. The reason that this attracted my attention when I first saw it on the list, excuse me, I think I'm going to live. Yes, the reason that I saw this, that it attracted my attention is because the American hardcover of Maclean's Napoleon, which I got, is ugly. Really ugly. No surprise that it had a hideously ugly American edition. And this is not. This is sort of predictable, but still much more eye-catching. And it will allow me to get rid of all the other Napoleonic studies that I have and just keep this one. I don't like this figure in history at all. Uh, I and uh, and therefore he's been the subject of an endless ocean of biographical treatments of one kind or another. I've read so many of them, reviewed some. I've written about this person so many times, and those books tend to accumulate, and I don't want them. I want just a few books, just like Stalin or Hitler. I want just a couple of books about this guy. This is one of them, and the other one is Andrew Roberts. The historian Andrew Roberts did a book that in its UK release was called Napoleon the Great. In America, it had a very ugly, a very boring cover, and was called Napoleon: A Life. But the UK edition came out with no portrait, just fleur-de-lis on the cover, in the hardcover. And that's what I want. I want the hardcover UK release of Andy Roberts' book on Napoleon. And I'm not about to pay any online prices for it. I got the American edition in the advanced copy and the finished copy and then the trade paperback. But I got rid of them all. I want, that's the other Napoleon book that I want, but I don't want it in that edition. I want the hardcover edition of the UK release of that book. And it's a stretch, but even so, I'm saying the Brattle will provide. The Brattle is a used bookstore here in Boston, and they see just about everything. Just about, they do. And I can easily picture the route. You know, some business person buys a secondhand copy of Napoleon the Great in a used bookstore in the UK, reads it on the flight over, realizes that Andrew Roberts is making a gigantically enthusiastic case in favor of Napoleon, and decides, well, not only do I not agree with that, but the thing's as heavy as a cinder block, so I'm just going to, bring it to a used bookstore here in Boston and drop it off. I could easily picture that happening, so it's possible that the Brattle will get me a copy of that book. And other than that, this is the only one I want, and now I have it in the edition that I want. So fantastic. Great. So there's the mail. One mail haul among many? I don't know. I don't know if that's the tingling that I've got or if it's just plain old arthritis like an old coot. One way or another, we'll find out together. So I will wrap this up for now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.